Every bond we form, every person we are drawn to, carries within it a mirror that reflects not only what we admire, but also what we have long buried within ourselves. In the intimacy of love, there is no escape from the hidden corners of the psyche, for it is precisely in closeness that the unseen comes alive. What is concealed within you is called forth by another, and what is unresolved seeks recognition in the very place you most desire harmony. Relationships are not merely about affection or companionship, they are also arenas of transformation. The struggles, the misunderstandings, and the disappointments are not signs of failure, but signs that something deeper is at work. What you resist in your partner may be a reflection of what you resist in yourself. What irritates you may reveal a wound you have not yet healed. In this way, love becomes more than comfort. It becomes a crucible, demanding that you face what you would rather keep hidden. To step into this reality requires courage, for it is far easier to blame the other than to confront the shadow that emerges within. But when you choose to see the shadow not as an enemy, but as a teacher, the very difficulties that once threatened to break your connection become the keys to growth. True love is not about avoiding the shadow, but about walking through it together, allowing the darkness to reveal the path toward greater wholeness. When two people are drawn together, they rarely realize that the bond they form will open doors to places within themselves that have long been kept locked. Love carries with it a peculiar power. It softens our defenses and dissolves the masks we wear, leaving us exposed not only to another person, but also to what dwells unacknowledged in the depths of our own being. It is in this exposure that the shadow is unveiled, the forgotten and unaccepted elements of our personality rising to the surface with an intensity that can surprise and even disturb us. What we thought we had left behind, what we had denied or buried, finds new life in the presence of intimacy. In daily life, we can hide these aspects of ourselves. We present the competent, the kind, the generous, or the strong. Yet in the closeness of love, those fragments of us that do not fit the picture, the anger, the jealousy, the fear, the neediness, emerge, often against our will. It can feel as if the relationship itself has awakened them. But the truth is that they were always there, waiting for the right moment to be seen. The beloved becomes both the mirror and the catalyst, reflecting back what has long been hidden. This unveiling is not a punishment, but an opportunity. Love brings out the shadow because love demands wholeness. A genuine bond cannot thrive on fragments of the self. It asks for the totality of who we are, and that includes what we would rather ignore. To encounter our shadow in this way is unsettling, for it forces us to admit that the person we imagine ourselves to be is incomplete. We are confronted with impulses that clash with our ideals, with emotions that disrupt our harmony, with patterns that sabotage the very intimacy we crave. And yet, it is precisely here that transformation is possible. To unveil the shadow is to be given the chance to know ourselves more deeply. What emerges in love can become the material of growth if we do not turn away from it in fear or denial. Instead of projecting blame onto the partner, we can ask what part of us is being shown, what hidden wound is crying out for recognition, what disowned trait seeks integration. In doing so, the relationship becomes more than a comfort. It becomes a vessel of awakening, a sacred ground upon which we are made whole. When you understand that love brings out hidden parts of yourself, not to destroy but to heal, you begin to see conflict differently. You see that every outburst, every surge of jealousy, every moment of fear is a messenger pointing toward deeper self-awareness. You come to honor the bond not only as a union with another, but also as a journey into the uncharted regions of your own soul. In this way, the unveiling of the shadow is not the end of love, but the beginning of a more authentic, enduring connection that can carry both light and darkness with equal strength and grace. When we fall in love or feel a powerful attraction, it often seems as though we have discovered someone who completes us, someone who carries the qualities we have longed for but never found. Yet, what is rarely understood is that much of this initial spark arises not from truly knowing the other person, but from the phenomenon of projection. We cast onto them the images, desires, and forgotten aspects of our own inner life, and then respond to these reflections as if they were the essence of the beloved. This is why the beginning of a relationship can feel so intoxicating. We are not merely encountering another soul, but glimpsing the unacknowledged parts of our own being shining back at us through their presence. Projection is not a deception in the malicious sense, but it is a distortion. The qualities we admire, the strength, the sensitivity, the creativity, the warmth, may indeed exist in the other, but the intensity with which we perceive them comes from within us. We are encountering our own hidden potential, clothed in the form of another person. This is why relationships can feel like destiny, as though we have found the missing piece of ourselves. The other becomes a mirror, and in that reflection we see both our light and our shadow. But inevitably, the projection begins to fade. Reality asserts itself, and the beloved reveals their flaws, their differences, their limitations. What once felt like perfection now feels imperfect, and disappointment sets in. Many relationships falter at this stage, for it feels as though the dream has been broken. Yet this moment is not a tragedy, it is a necessary awakening. To truly love, one must move beyond projection. One must learn to see the other, not only as a vessel for our inner world, but as a unique and separate being, with their own complexities, struggles, and depth. This process requires courage because it demands that we reclaim what we had projected. If we saw strength in them, we must discover strength in ourselves. If we admired their compassion, we must cultivate our own. If their flaws disturb us, we must ask whether those very qualities lie unacknowledged in our own shadow. By doing this, the relationship shifts from illusion to authenticity, from a dance of projections to a meeting of two whole individuals. The beauty of projection is that it can guide us toward what we most need to develop within. It shows us the possibilities we carry, but have yet to embrace. If we are willing to use it wisely, every relationship becomes a path of self-discovery. Rather than resenting the disillusionment when the dream fades, we can celebrate the opportunity to grow, to integrate, and to deepen our love beyond fantasy. For true intimacy begins not when we lose the dream, but when we choose to see both ourselves and the other with clarity, honesty, and reverence. Embracing the mirror as a tool for becoming whole, while honoring the beloved as more than just a reflection of our own soul. Conflict in relationships is often as a sign that something has gone terribly wrong. Yet beneath the surface of every argument lies an opportunity for profound self-discovery. The tension that arises between two people who care for one another does not merely expose incompatibilities or differences, it functions as a mirror, reflecting back the hidden aspects of our own psyche. What irritates us most in another often points to what we have not yet reconciled within ourselves. In this way, conflict is not only inevitable but necessary, for it brings into the light the very elements of our shadow that we would otherwise leave unexamined. When anger erupts, when jealousy burns, or when words strike us with disproportionate force, it is worth pausing to ask why these emotions are so powerful. Often, the partner has touched a nerve that connects to an unresolved wound or a disowned trait within us. If we have denied our own vulnerability, we may despise it in the other. If we repress our aggression, we may see it everywhere but in ourselves. The more unconscious the shadow, the more likely it is to emerge through projection, turning ordinary disagreements into explosive battles. In these moments, the other person becomes a stage upon which our inner conflicts are acted out, and the relationship becomes a theater of the psyche. To see conflict in this way requires a shift in perspective. Instead of asking only how the other has wronged us, we must also ask what the conflict is trying to reveal about our inner world. Every quarrel is a message, every disappointment a signpost. The qualities that provoke us can guide us to the very places where growth is most needed. By turning inward and acknowledging these truths, we begin to reclaim the shadow and reduce its power to sabotage intimacy. Conflict then ceases to be a destructive force and becomes a teacher that invites us to greater self-knowledge. This does not mean that every tension should be romanticized or tolerated without boundaries. Rather, it means that the discomfort of conflict carries within it the possibility of transformation. If approached with openness, the very traits that once seemed intolerable can reveal something essential about our own nature. When two people are willing to view their struggles as mirrors rather than weapons, the relationship becomes a crucible in which both are refined. True love does not eliminate conflict, but learns to use it. Through the fire of tension, the hidden self is unveiled, and the bond deepens because both partners are no longer relating only through their projections, but through a shared journey of discovery. The shadow that once threatened to divide them becomes the bridge that connects them. In this way, conflict becomes not the end of love, but the path to its most authentic form, a form that embraces both light and darkness, both harmony and struggle, as essential to the wholeness of the human soul. The instinct when confronted with our darker impulses is often to push them away, to deny their existence, and to maintain the illusion that we are only the polished version of ourselves. Yet repression is not freedom. What is pushed down does not disappear. It waits beneath the surface, shaping our choices, our reactions, and even our relationships in ways we do not recognize. In the realm of love, repression creates distance and misunderstanding, for the hidden parts of ourselves inevitably emerge, often in destructive ways, when they are not acknowledged. True growth does not come from pretending the shadow is not there, but from daring to integrate it into the fullness of who we are. Integration requires honesty. It asks us to look squarely at the impulses we feared: envy, anger, selfishness, insecurity, desire for control. Rather than casting them away, we must understand what they reveal about our unmet needs, our vulnerabilities, and our human limitations. When these elements are brought into awareness, they lose their capacity to dominate us unconsciously. The anger that once erupted uncontrollably can transform into healthy boundaries. The jealousy that poisoned intimacy can turn into a deeper recognition of our own worth. The fear that silenced us can become the seed of courage. In this way, what was once seen as darkness becomes the material for inner strength. Relationships provide the perfect ground for this work because they are where repression is most often tested. A partner will inevitably draw out qualities we would rather not admit we possess. The temptation is to project those traits onto them, to make them carry the burden of what we refuse to face. But when we choose integration, we claim responsibility for our inner life. We begin to say, "This anger is mine, this insecurity belongs to me, this craving for control is part of my own story." Owning these truths creates a space of authenticity where real intimacy can flourish, for we are no longer hiding behind masks, but showing up with the wholeness of our being. The path of integration is not easy, but it is liberating. It transforms relationships from fragile arrangements built on illusions into resilient bonds grounded in reality. Two people who have chosen to face their shadows together do not fear the eruption of darkness, for they know it can be a source of growth. They learn to see in each conflict and in each flaw a chance to deepen their understanding and strengthen their union. In the end, integration is the path to wholeness. It is the realization that we are not divided between light and dark, good and bad, acceptable and unacceptable, but that all these parts form the totality of who we are. By welcoming the shadow into consciousness, we do not become less, we become more. The darkness ceases to be a threat and instead becomes the raw material out of which wisdom, compassion, and authentic love are forged. Love, at its deepest level, is not the merging of two perfect beings, but the meeting of two whole individuals who are willing to see and accept each other as they truly are. Wholeness in love is not achieved by hiding flaws or suppressing conflict, but by allowing the relationship to become a vessel where the shadow can be faced and transformed. The parts of ourselves we once denied, feared, or rejected become invitations to greater intimacy when brought into the open with honesty and courage. Through this process, love ceases to be a fragile arrangement based on illusion and becomes a resilient union rooted in truth. Shadow work in relationships means that each partner must be willing to hold up the mirror and see not only the beauty, but also the wounds, the insecurities, and the darker impulses that emerge in closeness. This can feel threatening, for it is far easier to idealize love as a refuge from struggle. Yet the reality is that no relationship can remain authentic if it is built on denial. When we embrace the shadow, when we acknowledge jealousy, pride, fear, or anger as part of our inner landscape, we free love from the burden of perfection and allow it to grow on the foundation of authenticity. This path creates deeper bonds because it transforms intimacy into a shared journey of discovery. Instead of fearing what lies hidden, two people learn to face it together. Every conflict becomes a chance to understand one another more profoundly. Every projection that once caused division becomes an opportunity to reclaim and integrate what was disowned. Love becomes not a fragile dream to be protected from reality, but a living force that thrives precisely because it welcomes reality in all its complexity. Wholeness in love does not mean that struggles vanish or that imperfections disappear. It means that struggles are not seen as failures, but as gateways, that imperfections are not threats, but reminders of humanity. To love wholly is to recognize that both light and shadow belong to the human soul, and that intimacy deepens when both are allowed to exist without shame. In such a relationship, partners grow together not by clinging to an idealized image of one another, but by continuously embracing the evolving truth of who they are. In the end, wholeness in love is not about finding someone who completes you, but about creating a union where both can become more complete through each other's presence. Shadow work transforms the bond into a crucible where growth, healing, and authenticity are forged. This kind of love is rare, for it requires vulnerability, honesty, and courage, but it is the only love that endures. It is the love that carries both the light of joy and the depth of struggle, both the beauty of harmony and the truth of imperfection, weaving them together into a bond that is as unbreakable as it is transformative. Love that endures is not built upon illusions of perfection, but upon the willingness to face the truth of who we are, both in light and in shadow. When two people commit, not only to each other, but also to their own inner work, the relationship evolves beyond surface attraction and becomes a journey of transformation. The conflicts that once seemed like threats become invitations to grow, and the qualities once denied in ourselves are embraced as part of the fullness of being human. In this way, love matures. It ceases to be fragile, dependent on constant harmony, and instead becomes resilient, capable of carrying both joy and struggle without breaking. To accept the shadow is to embrace reality, and in embracing reality, we discover a bond that is deeper, truer, and more enduring than any fantasy could provide. The work of wholeness in love is not easy, but it is meaningful. It asks for courage, patience, and vulnerability. Yet in answering that call, we find a connection that reflects not only the beauty of our partner, but also the vast, untapped depths within ourselves. Such love is not fleeting, it is transformative, and it changes everything